this room we barely need a mic. Is the mic on? Okay, thanks. Okay, welcome and good morning to everybody. I hope you had a nice evening yesterday. El micro no está bueno, la mesa es muy grande. So, okay, yeah, that's better. Okay, so we'll see how. Now I'm going to move the computer, and that's probably going to make a horrible sound, so prepare your ears. Made it. Okay, welcome to this session where we're going to talk about how XML is used inside FileMaker. This is me, David Wikström, home case data. I'm not going to do a very long introduction about myself. I'm a self-employed developer. I develop on my own. I have the usual background of having found FileMaker by accident, then with some zigzags ended up being a full-time developer, and I'm now running my own company since 15 years. I've been moving around a little bit. I started out, found FileMaker in Sweden, then in France, Canada, and right now I live in Germany. So that's basically it. Interesting fact in this context is I actually ran into, when I was like out of university having a first job, I ran into XML quite early before I was I had seen FileMaker, but I wasn't a developer properly. I was a citizen developer at best at the time. So I kind of have a long history with XML, but it's not really gone that deep or that far necessarily, but it's still an ongoing relationship, like an on and off relationship, if you like. So these are basically the topics where you realize that the screen settings are not correct. So let me just switch to mirroring and see if that helps. Sorry about that. Okay, so still not working, okay. So are we anywhere close now? Let's see if we can get the resolution right. Still not. Is anybody good with monitor resolutions? So, sorry for this. Here, no. Okay. Vim, do you happen to know how to set the monitor settings properly? You who know everything? No? Yeah, I think I tried that already. Interestingly enough, that should normally be the right one, but we still can't see the full slide. So. Yes, well, we can view it like this. Pull and play. Yeah. That was. Thank you very much for that advice. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to do this the silly way. We'll try to resize things a little bit. XML is not a very visual topic anyway, so slides are kind of tricky. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so anyway, back to the topic. These are the things we're going to talk about. First, a quick introduction about XML, then some examples of programming FileMaker with FileMaker. Then we'll go through the different ways in which, a number of different ways in which XML is used inside FileMaker, and then we'll do a few deep dives. So like the whole, for me, the purpose of this session is, it's kind of a topic that's a bit tricky because it can get very geeky. So I have like a high-level message, which is that this is an important topic that everybody needs to pay attention to. You're not going to have to, the purpose is not that you actually know what to do exactly, but that you pay attention to how important FileMaker XML is when we are using FileMaker on a daily basis. And the deep dives, therefore, will be, depending on how deep you have already gone before, you may find them quite shallow or too deep. But the general message is that, once again, that this is an important topic that we all should pay attention to as FileMaker developers. And some of you may have a feeling of déjà vu, because I presented in 2019 in Spain and in Scandinavia, in Denmark, a previous version of this session, and my interest in presenting this kind of almost the same topic again is not least to look at what's changed and what hasn't changed since 2019, or in our way of counting time, in like mid-FileMaker 18. So there are, as we'll see shortly, there are quite a few things that have changed, and there were also a lot of things that I was guessing at the time, because a lot of the way XML is used inside FileMaker isn't really properly documented, or I haven't really seen it explained to the full extent that one would like. So there's a lot of guesswork in this presentation, and the presentation I did last time as well. So very briefly, first, what is XML? I think most of us know here. It's a markup language that has the system with tags and attributes, and then the text content of each tag. So it's structured in a very simple way. A few key concepts. XML itself is the extensible markup language, and it is indeed very extensible. You can do very simple things like what we just saw, and then you can do some much more complex things that we'll be getting into later. XSLT is basically what we use to take XML input and change it into something else, to say it simply. Classical example is importing records from XML in FileMaker. You can do that with an XSLT, and then you get it into the format you need. Or exporting is the same thing. And expat is basically a query language. If you want to find something in an XML file, that's how you set field, perform search, kind of equivalent. And XML is everywhere. And I think it's something that somehow to me, XML is like the great, it's not the elephant in the room, but it's not mentioned as much as it should be. And we are all using it all the time. As soon as we go on a web page, hopefully it's HTML anyway, if it's not very, very old. Excel files are actually bundles of XML files. An Adobe Premiere file is an XML file. So XML really is everywhere, and not least important, FileMaker and XML go really well together, and they go really well together since a very long time back. FileMaker was really early in adopting XML, which of course for us makes it once more again important for us to really pay attention to this. And the last thing that for me when I got started was really important is just text. Of course, no programming background or nothing, but I could read books. So it's just text. You can read it, you can compile it with FileMaker text functions if you have to. It's not always the best thing to do for performance reasons, but you can. You can edit it in a text editor, you can understand what it says. As long as in the end the text respects the format, it will work, no matter how you got there. And that for me makes it also easy to start with some XML. You tweak one thing, you see if it still works, you tweak another thing, and then you go on. And that's kind of been my journey. And it was a bit later that I actually started using proper XSLT functions and things like that. But I still do a lot of my compiling of code is just text parsing and combining text chunks of text with some placeholders and very like basic old school FileMaker methods that, as long as you don't need really good performance, are very flexible because you can implement so much business logic. And so back to the general purpose is like easier, better, and bolder development is kind of what my message is, that we need to leverage XML to achieve that. So even more in general, the same way we are delivering to our customers easier, better, and bolder ways of doing their jobs, we are building tools for them. We should also think about building tools for ourselves, general tools and custom tools for more specific tasks. Easier development with XML means you can create more code with less manual effort, which is wonderful. You can have better code because you can actually check how does my code actually look. Is it consistent? If you generate code programmatically, it'll be much more consistent. It will not necessarily be better, but being consistent is already a good start, because then you fix it in fewer places and it gets better. And my favorite probably, which we'll get into shortly, is to be bolder. We can do things we can't otherwise do if we leverage the XML that's inside FileMaker. And I'm using bolder in the Star Trek sense of the term, of course. So speaking of bolder, I'm now going to start with a few examples of things I've done over the years, leveraging XML inside FileMaker. So how it all started out was 2007. There was this kind of product that came along that was Clip Manager, my F and Butter Clip Manager. And at the time we had a project that some of in the audience know of, where we needed to do localization, and there was no such thing as set field by name. So I came up with a way of basically generating the fields and the scripts to set the fields using the clipboard XML, which is what Clip Manager addresses. So you copy a bunch, like one line of script, and then you add the placeholders, and you have a loop basically that then does set field. And then you paste that into to your solution, and you have a wonderful script that sets all the fields, and it actually works. And of course, it's very primitive, but it solves a real-life problem. And that, to me, is when almost everything I've done with Wikström XML in FileMaker is to solve real-life problems, and it has been productive. A lot of the things like this we don't have to worry about anymore because it's supported natively in FileMaker. And that goes for like several of the examples. So just quickly go through some other examples. I did a migration utility database because I had a strange migration where the structure was, during the migration development, rewrite was changing all the time. So I was doing like all the matching of the importing, exporting the data, getting the old fields, getting the new fields, matching all that with a FileMaker database. Setting up conditional formatting is a pain. I had this thing where I needed 88 colors. I wasn't going to do that manually, and I needed it in a lot of different contexts in the database. So I just set up something to generate, in this case, the clipboard content or the layout objects with different conditions, with references to the fields we wanted to have, and then we could change. We ended up just using the 88 colors in the classical FileMaker palette at the time, but it's variable, so you could choose whatever colors you wanted and include it, and then in the end that would give this FileMaker palette was also generated by compiling clipboard XML and then the script too. Is it impossible to read, or is it just me, the text from here? It's extremely blurry. Okay. Well, as I said, it's not a very visual topic, so we'll have to deal with that, I guess. Another thing that is still tricky.
In the top there is a zoom.
You can hide the format palette on
No,
the
in the toolbar.
In the toolbar? Yeah,
That's it. That's the format.
that one?
Click it.
Oh.
And maybe zoom.
On the left.
On the left.
Thank you. Yay! Thank you. Teamwork. So another thing I still find frustrating in FileMaker is sorting, because you can't sort by calculation. So I did this. This was kind of overkill in hindsight, and I've done like more modest versions of it, but I would just like I had a script that would loop through the solution, would find everything that I would want to sort by in list views, and then compile a very nice 6,249 lines long script, or depending on the size of the solution. But I used it to actually perform surprisingly well if you have like an Angry Buoy kind of structure and you do if else if. It was actually performance-wise, it was not a problem at all. And it gave you options to do you want to keep the sort order, you want to sort in English or in French, you could add all these options. So that one, I don't use it anymore, but I used it for quite a few years, and yeah, it was actually, it worked really well. When the icons first came out, we didn't have the SVG icons at first, and you couldn't really, you need to have one PNG per state. So I did something where actually I started with SVG icons, and then I could set up the colors and generate like the 4 images for each state, for each type of icon. And that was also like now is not something I use anymore, because we have other methods, even if they're not perfect. It's too much overhead, but it's still, for a few years, it did help me a lot. Another more recent thing, creating lots of fields and then value lists based on those fields, because for specific reasons, I needed a lot of, I don't know how many, 80 value lists or something with the fields, and I did not want to do that manually. This is also was kind of a first proof of concept I did, because I live in Germany, so I have some customers who require me to code and comment in German. And of course I had my standard scripts, everything which are in some kind of English. So I was playing around with the idea, okay, do I really have to do that manually, rewrite everything down? So I did this tool that actually, it kind of works, that allows me to pick the start language and the output language, and then automatically translates anything that I consider can be localized. So it's not user interface localization, but it's code localization. And further on that, more practically usable, when the add-on modules came out, I wanted to try doing add-ons. And of course, one of the wonderful things with add-ons is that there's a localization option built into it, which we don't normally have having FileMaker. And also, if you want lots of points as a Claris partner and you have many products and you have one in each language, that counts in a very nice way. And you also show up if you go to the marketplace or click from inside FileMaker, show add-ons on marketplace. If FileMaker is running in German, they will see the add-ons in German. And if you're the only one who has an add-on in German, maybe that's not too bad. So there was also like a slight business intent behind this. And this one we'll get back to look a bit closer at later on. And then I started going into Save as XML, the output for Save as XML, and my first frustration was keeping track of all my icons, because, yeah, the interface we're having in FileMaker for managing icons is not ideal. So I did something that would just pull all the unique icons from all the solutions I ever developed, put them into the database, and then when I need to use them, I could select them, and that would put them in the clipboard, and I could then insert them into a new solution. You just insert it and delete it, and then of course it's stored in that file and available. And then the last example here is Scrutinizer Sample, which is an API for real-time developer intelligence, as I have very pretentiously titled it, and we will also be getting back to this one. So this allows you to do basically runtime queries in the output of Save a Copy as XML. So going back to my first presentation and this presentation, these are like the things that have changed. The things that are, first of all, that I have once again based on reverse engineering, hacking, looking around, the things I have found where XML is used internally in FileMaker. So the database design report, we'll go through this in detail, but coming to the changes, we used to have these things, add-on tables and starter solutions. In FileMaker 18, they are now gone. And at the time, when you looked at the structure of it, for those of you who were at the conference 4 years ago and remember every detail, you could kind of see that it was going in a certain direction. So these were, to me, were the precursors of now our add-on modules. Save a Copy as XML has had some very important developments since the initial version, which we'll also get back to, and then the custom upgrade tool has also come along. So going further into the details, database design report is so the must-have tool for so many years, and it's really the way to know, okay, is my code more or less clean? It's kind of, so for me, like every time I deploy something, or very regular intervals, everything I run it through the DDMR or XML, or what have I used, sort of. It was, for many, many years, a great tool, but it also always lacked some pieces of information that were completely crucial, but we just had gotten used to the layouts not being there as a thing. You only had layout objects, you didn't have layouts and layout parts in a proper way, so you could know how big things were. And that is like one point where I'm kind of surprised / disappointed, is that to me this is still a must-have, something I use every day. I would have thought 4 years ago that we would have moved away from this by now, but of course everybody has limited resources, and I can understand that might not be the priority to be able to completely replace this yet, but that's kind of a little bit of a disappointment. And the really important thing about the database design report as well is that it has proper documentation, which is not the case for a lot of internal XML. And that also makes it a lot easier to work with, because all the rest is like trial and error and reverse engineering and hoping for the best. And there are, of course, some amazing tools that use you. If you're not using one of these, you're in trouble. Which one you use is personal taste. I've been a base elements guy for many years, because to me it's the closest thing to like normal FileMaker database. But I've used all of them over the years, and they definitely all are very complementary as well, if you have time to learn them all properly. So now we're going to go like inside FileMaker Pro to see what we can find, what XML we can find there. So if you haven't already done it on Windows, it's easy enough. You just click down in the program files, FileMaker, etc. On the Mac, you need to right-click or control-click to do show package contents, and then you see all these folders, all this content. And you see the add-on modules. Probably you can't read it, but it says add-on modules on top, which is where the add-on modules are stored. And then you have, for the different 11 localizations, you also have specific folders. So here we can find some stuff that uses XML if we look around. One of them is default fields, which also is the second thing that actually has documentations. So that's what happens when you create a new table, you get these default fields. And the nice thing with default fields, they came out in FileMaker 17, and they were, for me, they gave a lot of hope in terms of where we are going long term, and they were also a really good way of getting started with playing around with changing things, because there is an internally stored copy of default fields XML, or FM default fields XML as it's called now, but there is also a documented way of where you put it in the shared subfolder to the shared for other application support, etc. And then your own file will be used. So if you wanted to have your default fields in Catalan, you could do that, even if there's no localized version of FileMaker. If you wanted to have more fields than these 5, if you wanted to have a different naming convention, whatever you want to do, you could kind of do it. Unfortunately, and yeah, this is basically what it looks like in the Dutch version. And as you see, this is typically, okay, this is just text. It's not too big. I can play around with it. I can figure out how things work. I can break things. So that for that reason, I'm really happy with the FM default fields. And there was, like in the Claris community, there was quite a lot of discussion at the time. People were really excited, and then I kind of stopped using it. Partially because nowadays there's a bug that, as far as I can remember, wasn't in the first version. If you have fields that reference other fields that are also in your default fields, they will have broken references nowadays. I don't know if you can see the 2 last lines here, but they are commented out. I have fields that reference another field. So to me, that limits it a lot, and I've gone back to just having my clipboard XML template that I paste in instead as my default tables, unfortunately. But we heard also from Clay yesterday that apparently they are still finally thinking of doing what you could see in the initial versions. Okay, this was for fields, but the structure kind of allowed for adding other things. And now finally it sounds like they are working on that. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. And themes are also, of course, the themes themselves are CSS files, like the details of the design, but the way they are structured, the names, and this is, of course, our favorite Bleu Sommet, or Azure Blue, Apex Blue, sorry, and that just gives you an idea. And I personally never tried creating my own themes with this, but of course you can. It's just text, right? And then you can hope it works. And if nothing else, what is very good with using the XML and trying it is also, it kind of gives you a better understanding of how FileMaker, normal FileMaker works. Even if you end up not actually manipulating the XML, it's kind of an indirect way of looking into how certain things react, what attributes you can and cannot set, what's actually available as an attribute, even if it's not in the interface, GUI interface of FileMaker Pro. Web viewers are also something I have not played around with, but you have these, you have Google Maps, you have MapQuest, whatever. The list of these websites is also all done as an XML configuration. The nice things, as we see here, this is the Italian one. All these XML formats is also what is heavily used in the localization of FileMaker, which to me is something that I find is really a strength. One of the many things that makes the FileMaker and for the FileMaker community special is that you can actually do most things in the language you are most comfortable with, if you're lucky enough to be comfortable in one of those 11 languages that FileMaker is localized into. And then last but not least, definitely in this case, is the custom upgrade tool, which is currently in developer preview. So this is also something I have played around with, others have played around with it. I have not yet had a case where it really felt like I needed to, it would actually solve a proper problem for me. The first versions were kind of very frustrating. Now you can get things to work. Because basic what it does is that you have a command line tool, you give it this XML, and you give it a FileMaker file, and then it modifies the FileMaker file. So it's like a dream come true. I mean, like going back to the presentation I did 4 years ago, it's kind of the dream thing that you really allows you to automate things and to generate whatever kind of XML you want, however you want it, and then just apply that dynamically. So it opens up new horizons, new galaxies, whatever you like. So for now, what I think I still haven't done myself, but I know others have done, you can use it to keep all your custom functions up to date, which is kind of nice, because that's kind of simple, isolated enough. It's not the complex objects that are interdependent. If you have a lot of solutions, if you have a lot of files, keeping your custom functions up to date is kind of a pain. It would be better that we wouldn't even need to do that, that there would be like a shared resource in some way for that, but for now that's one thing. You can add fields in a nice way. The other thing also, if I had the case where I would probably try using it, is if I ever have a big solution where I need to change the index language of the field. I had that case once where, I don't remember which, between Swedish and English I need to switch one way, and I had to do that manually. And next time I'm not going to do that manually if I ever have to do it, because in some cases it's really, really crucial that the indexing, or it's always really crucial, but people don't always pay attention to it. That the language, the field is indexing, because of course it affects sorts and things like that. So now going more into the deep dives, I'll give some more background first on the clipboard, which is really the part of the internal XML that I use the most, and the way I develop has really changed since I started using the clipboard XML, because my workflow is really copy, edit, paste, edit. That's kind of my standard workflow for a lot of things. Depends on the solution, especially when you're like building out the new solutions, because you have these general structures. You have a parent-child relationship, but it can be dogs, it can be cats. The specific terminology of it is different, but you can take something, you modify the XML, and then you paste it in as a new thing. And that to me is an extremely good, high increase in productivity. So this once again goes back to what I mentioned before. The first version of Clip Manager is where anyway, first got insight into this mystery. Okay, there's actually something you can look at here in the clipboard, because I was just copy pasting innocently, having no clue what I was doing, right? And there are actually now, it's been evolving a little bit. Used to be fewer things that you could copy paste. Custom functions came along at some point. Themes, value lists, and custom menu sets are relatively recent. But this is, of course, all extremely handy that you can copy paste them between solutions, inside solutions, but also that you can manipulate them, change them. The classic example when they would is when you explain why Clip Manager was a good investment is layout objects. You have a portal. If you're using Anchor GUI with a naming convention, you don't have to redo the portal again. You just copy it. You replace the specific strings that make it refer to a given a table occurrence group or not, and then you paste it in. And then, of course, you can take that further and do more complex replaces. And then you can really do very interesting things, and I do a lot less like objects from scratch, layout objects from scratch, and the same thing goes for scripts and any other element really. So when you copy something, once again, it is kind of magic. You just copy, but that's not actually how it works. When you copy something, yes. You should ask Clay, it's probably his fault. No, because as I said, unfortunately I don't know a lot of things, I'm just seeing what I can see. But they would need to add support for that. We can also not copy a layout, we can only duplicate it. So that also does not come into, there are a lot of things missing, definitely. And I don't know if there is a technical reason for that, or if it's just that nobody thought of doing it. The relationship graph, I kind of can see that that's a kind of, it's a strange thing to, I can see that as being more complex. Layouts, I think it should be possible. I can see a reason that it shouldn't be possible. So anyway, we get all these different flavors, like if we copy layout objects, we get a couple of image versions of the thing, and then we get the first format, which is the most interesting to us, which is the XML that we can manipulate to copy paste. So this is, once again, not so easy to see, but it's a bunch of XML that represents a few layout objects. And when I'm doing all this copy pasting, the classical tool for me was, since Clip Manager 2000, I would use all the versions of Clip Manager. Unfortunately, that project has been discontinued. It has a very handy GUI, and above all, I've been using it for so long that for me it's like, I don't have to think. It doesn't have to be the best tool, but it's the tool that I can use most efficiently anyway. It's been discontinued. I actually still use it because it still runs on my Mac because I haven't installed the latest OS upgrades. But there are lots of options going forward for doing something else. I just personally haven't made up my mind yet because I haven't had to. So you can, and when I do my own things, more complex things, of course I use plugins, and I don't with FileMaker script. So there are a number of plugins that allow you to read and write the clipboard. There are lots of snippet and text expansion tools that also integrate all this, and a number of other special tools from One More Thing has one. There are Dropship. There are a number of different tools because it's a need everybody has. And so as a last kind of short mention of something that's not strictly XML is that when you are copy pasting, some things, but not all things, are written to import this import.log file, which will be in your documents folder. If it's a hosted file, it will be next to the file you're working on if it's a local file. And this has been, Mr. Watson had a wonderful tool many years ago to parse this, because that will also give you warnings. If you paste something and the reference isn't working, you get a warning. And now recently, this is my best new tool this year. FM Rainbow Log is a command line tool that runs a live watch on the import.log. So you get an alert each time I paste something and it's broken, as long as it's not a layout object or something that's not written to import.log, like fields and scripts. Each time I get something that's open, I have my little sidecar iPad, and I have a beep and I have a notification. Hey, you have to fix this. Don't keep just working. because I've done, I don't know if you've done it, but to me, one of the things that you copy paste something and then you have, like with the default fields, the field gets commented out because the plugin isn't installed or whatever, whatever other field isn't broken, or I did my search and replace wrong, so it doesn't actually match where I'm pasting it. So that to me is a game changer. If you're not using it, check it out on GitHub. It's for free. It's a life changer. So save a copy as XML is, of course, this was like the way it was presented when it first came out. This is like the official release notes. Document changes in your app and use standard text-based tools to compare versions. Completely impossible. No way you can do that with the complexity of the solutions we have. But it was still a way of knowing more about our solutions, and kind of felt like, okay, DDR 2.0 is what it's sometimes been sold as well, but it also has in the structure of save a copy as XML. We also have these things that we recognize from what used to be add-on tables and the starter solutions. So we have this add action and modify action. We have metadata. We have a bunch of things that are kind of more not only about describing something, but also about things being able to change. And that's, once again, where some of us get very excited. And it's also pretty much complete. The first versions had some limitations, and but it's been getting better and better, more and more complete. And now I think it's getting to a point where probably the DDR, if you need to take the time to rewrite your tool, and I just learned that Inspector Pro 8 is coming out soon, and they are switching to save a copy as XML. So that to me is amazing news, and then I guess everybody else will have to follow. But you can get all this information that you cannot get elsewhere. You cannot even get in the DDR. You can't get them with the database design function. And there is also, going back to the comparison, which is not possible. There is a great product, actually, FM Comparison from Proofgeist, that does allow you to do a proper comparison of different versions and see what has changed. But even with this, it's kind of in a complex solution with a lot of changes. I still find that it's a challenge to find everything properly and apply it. And you will have some false positives, and that also, like, depending on the version of say the copy as XML and which version of FileMaker you created, things change a little bit. And then we have the add-on modules, which came along, and also once again were introduced as this great end user thing. But the real news is that it's so dynamic. It's about changing a lot of things, and not just changing default fields, but changing a lot of different types of objects all in one go, and changing an existing file. So we'll get into more details shortly. So we have the built-in add-on modules, a bunch of JavaScript-based ones, these are really the old add-on tables, more or less, that are just FileMaker with no JavaScript in them. And then, of course, there's the marketplace with third-party add-ins that you can install. And also what I kind of think, because there are some limitations to add-ons, of course, especially from a product point of view, that you can't really release updates or bug fixes for them. There's no proper mechanism for that at this point. So I have a few add-ons on the marketplace, but they are definitely all for free and no guarantee. Because to me that's not a tempting scenario to deploy a product I can't update. But what I find very interesting is to use add-ons internally to deploy your own ways of doing things. It is very handy, and you can deploy big chunks of functionality all in one go. You can't go too big, because there is if you start making, like, you take your favorite 60 table add-on and you try to make a solution, try to make an add-on of that's not going to work really well. It also has this limitation that a lot of FileMaker features unfortunately have, that it's single file centric. You can control security. There is a bunch of limitations, but the proof of concept, the kind of changes it makes possible, is really, really exciting once again. So now we are going to go over to demo. So I have two demos, which is first this Scrutinizer Central for Save a Copy as XML. And I'm actually doing that paired with add-on modules under the hood because Scrutinizer Central is deployed as an add-on. So I can add it whenever I need that. So let's see how our screen resolution will behave when we do this. So it's quite a quick, simple add-on. So this is just one of these famous starter files, and that's kind of also, I didn't go into the details about that. I did list it, the starter files like FileMaker 18, the starter files were actually XML packages, and that's also a nice way of creating a full solution from XML files. But now for some reason they've gone to back to deploying them as FMP12 files. But I think that was like also a test run for the add-on technology. So just to demo then the Marvel, because you get used to things like you can add an add-on and it works or it doesn't work, but you can, and then you have all these amazing functionality all in one go. And I mean, I actually find it kind of amazing. I try to remind myself that this is actually completely amazing that it works compared to what we were doing when we were young, when we couldn't even copy paste actually. So basically this comes, it's also one of those things that are really not end user friendly, because how do you demo an API? So this has a little bit of GUI, just so you can run some test functions. So then you can get, for instance, you can get a list of the layouts with lots more information than you can get from the design functions, for instance. Or you can get a list of all the accounts with the privilege set, etc. All this kind of information that is not available through any other means. You can't get it from the DDR, you can't get it from the design functions. And of course, I'm not going to show you. The examples here are just a fraction of the things you can query for. So of course, this is where we get geeky. You can set up your own actions as well. Of course, you just need to do your own XSLT. And just is, of course, ironically meant in this sense. It's not that easy. When I do it often, I get good at it. When I step away from it, I get bad at it again, and then I get good at it again. But it's actually, and this allows me to return the result. We saw the result was returned in JSON. We also have some functions where it's returned as a list. I can return it as whatever I want as long as it's text. And the good thing about using XSLT for this is, once again, that it's so fast, it's crazy. Like parsing, even if you have a huge file from Save a Copy as XML, parsing it is so fast. And we don't have the FileMaker text parsing engine limitation. We don't have the 2 gig limitation of how big a file can be. We just import from an XML file, and it's so fast. So that, once again, is a reason to get slightly familiar with XSLT, so that when you really need it, go ahead.
This is just for reading, you can't put it back into solution.
No, this is just, but you can combine it with other things that either generate clipboard content, though you need to transform because it's not like exactly the same format, because the clipboard formats are kind of have evolved over time. They haven't been updated. They would need to be updated at some point, but they haven't been yet. And what you also can do is the starting point for the custom app upgrade tool. So there you can definitely, I haven't spent the time to make it work, but I know there's no problem completely automating that. You run Save a Copy as XML, you parse it, you find the unique identifiers you need, you generate based on your business logic or your data, you generate your XML patch file, you apply it, and everything happens automatically. That is something that is technically possible. Financially non-viable at this time, I would say, but hopefully we will get there at some point. And we can get the layouts with a total part height, for instance. Impossible to know how big it is, and there are some cases. One of my favorites that is actually a real life scenario is if you use the field names design function, you don't get merge fields. And I had a solution where I absolutely needed to know that basically, for very long and complicated reasons, I needed to know exactly which merge fields were on which layout. So it was easy for me to, it was actually easy for me to just, since I'd done a few other XSLTs, I just did an XSLT to get the merge fields from the layouts that matched a certain naming convention with a, like, once again, a placeholder function. So I search just on what matches the string, and then I just get all the merge fields that are relevant, and then I put that in a field, and then I hook that up to an evaluate, and everything works automatically. I add a new layout, I just run the action again, and the data is stored, and it just works. So that's like an example of being bolder, doing things I would otherwise absolutely not have done. Second demo here is just to show, like, if you have already integrated the API into your solution, you're not actually going to be using this interface that I showed you. You will build your own scripts that run it. So here is just very simple user accounts. To me, it's kind of a good example. It's kind of a simple example at the same time. But you can, because I don't know, like when you have FileMaker accounts, for instance, you have no way of knowing which account is already in the file. So if you have like scripted creation, you need to always delete the account even if it doesn't exist, and it's kind of a pain. And you can also not easily show the users. If the users are creating their own records, you can't really keep track of that in a programmatic way. And here you just click the refresh button, and you have all the account. And of course, where it becomes interesting to me is also, you can also get the privilege sets and the details of what the privilege sets mean. And then you can finally try to do an interface that allows yourself and the user to understand what the security settings are in a solution, because that's something I often really struggle with my clients. And if I, like, the user interface to change the security settings in FileMaker are so non-optimal. And this really gives me a way of at least communicating what I've done to the client in a reasonable way. And that's where I would also really want the feedback option, as Magnus mentioned, where you would then, allow the client, change this, and then apply that. That would kind of be, of course, only certain users, but, or at least I can get that feedback myself, and then I kind of make those changes manually. Yes? Yes, sorry. Good question. Thank you. So normally now, since I'm paranoid, this is all local files, but normally the file will be on the server. There are different options.
Could you repeat the question? I couldn't hear the question.
Yeah. So what happens when I click the button? That was the question. So what happens when I click the button is it runs a script that is then a specific solution script that then runs the API script with certain parameters. And what it does is, in the normal scenario, it will save a copy as XML on the server, because that's the huge change that came along, that we can execute it on server, not only locally. So it's also typically fast, relatively fast. It runs it on server, then it exports the XSLT, imports the XML file from save a copy as XML, gets the result as a script parameter, and then that is just a JSON script parameter that the FileMaker script does the normal thing a FileMaker script will do with it. And I also have because typically for accounts it's different, but for most other elements I don't do live development. It doesn't actually have to be live, so I have a cache function. And then typically you can run every hour, every 3 weeks, whatever suits you. You always have like a save as XML that you trust, even though it's not 100% live. And then it's easy, you just have to run it live or don't run it live, run it for this other window that's open, run it in this current file, whatever you want is kind of supported by the API.
Sorry, what about script and script step in Scrutinizer? In
Sorry.
Scrutinizer Central.
Yes?
What about script and script steps?
I didn't do any examples for it, but you just add your own XSLT, yeah. I didn't have a use case. If you have a use case, let's discuss, and I'd be happy to do something, but I didn't have a use case yet.
Another other question, but it's more general.
Yeah.
About
It's a lot of pain. It's more pain. Like some objects are more pain, some are less pain. Layout objects are definitely the most pain, especially when you generate them and you need to calculate, okay, what's the size of the final totality of all the layout objects I'm going to enter? Like this color picker I had done, for instance, right? And that was a long time ago. We didn't have while, we didn't have. It's just pain.
And
It's not complicated.
And that, yes, I know, but and the ID object too, I think.
The object IDs, yeah.
Yeah.
And the references to styles and themes are also a bit of a pain. But it's, at least we have the possibility of doing it. It's not, I don't do this only. I don't do all my FileMaker development this way, right? It's for certain very specific cases where it actually pays off, but it's not for everything. I think, well, I'll just go very quickly on the last couple. So if we just look at what an add-on module looks like, I don't know if this is, yeah, you can kind of see this is basically one of the simpler FileMaker add-ons. This is one of these add-on tables where we basically have a few sets of files because a lot of things are being localized, right? So there are more files than you really need for an add-on, if you like. So the key thing is the template.xml. This is kind of where all the magic and the actual change instructions are stored. And then you have some metadata basically about the add-on that are as JSON files. You have a couple of images, and then you have the localization strings. And that's kind of where I really like when I first saw the add-ons. I was very happy about that because that's something I like a lot. If we look at my add-on, or one of my add-ons, this is Scrutinizer Central. It's basically got the same things, but it's got one extra element, which is records. And this is also, this could be a session in itself. How do you leverage add-ons to transfer data and all the benefits and downsides and complications with that comes, but that is a really interesting way of transferring data. Because of course this XML file, I don't have to generate it by doing save as add-on. It's just an XML data file. I can generate it any way I want. So I can have localized data, for instance, if I want. And speaking of localization, we'll quickly jump into Camelfish. So what this does is that it imports an add-on that's been generated the normal way, parses out all the different content into, this is like the table of strings for the localization. We have like the creator info, so I can actually set that. I don't have an add-on where I have to go in manually edit the JSON file, and I don't have like the default Claris information. I can have my own information, my own icon colors, whatever I want. Then I can also run a localization. Basically uses Google Translate or preferably DeepL, and then I just localize it into the languages I want to have it localized in. I only do it in the languages I feel relatively comfortable in. So, well, Italian I'm kind of actually not. I could try, but so only those languages, and then I check the translations, of course, because I don't. Yeah, you shouldn't trust blindly the automated translation. And then I just save that as a new add-on, and then that add-on is localized, and I can put it on the marketplace. I can get more points as a Claris partner. Yeah. And then that is basically it for the demo. So going back to our slides, this is basically it. So now if there are any, we have a couple of minutes left, if there are any additional questions, comments. I'd also be interested to hear in people who are also doing this, because one of the problems I see is that I know of people who are doing it, but nobody's talking about it. So that's something that I also, apart from like spreading their word that this is important, I would also like people to discuss this a lot more.
Your experience, in your experience, as a performance level, is better to use XLST or a function like XML of MBS or other?
No, XSLT. No discussion.
No discussion.
First of all, the plugins also have the file size limitation of the FileMaker variable. So you're already, because of course there's a particularity about the way save a copy as XML and add-ons work. If you have an image file 12 times in a file, in a normal FileMaker file, it doesn't increase, it's just a pointer to the same file. Right? Currently in save a copy as XML, and in add-ons, it will be inserted 12 times, the full base64 encoded JPEG or whatever. So I reported a couple of bugs of that because you could very easily get FileMaker to crash that way if you added a bit more. And now it kind of works-ish. It's better. It's not quite as bad as I think you get an error at least or something. But that's something they will need to change in structure for this to be long-term viable. For me, that's totally non-realistic.